I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
What is going on, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. It is Monday. We've got Dennis and Matt here with me to discuss the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Baltimore Ravens on the docket for today, probably with some Scott Fishbowl talk, as well as I'm through more than like 4 rounds. Still the slowest draft right now. We are still only like 9 rounds in, so yippee for us, but we're rocking and rolling with that. Before we get in and talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Baltimore Ravens, 2 of my least favorite teams in all of the NFL, how you gentlemen doing today?
Man, isn't that something? It's a Monday. You get to talk about 2 of your least favorite teams, but with the 2 of your favorite analysts. Wow.
You know, that doesn't make it any better. It really doesn't.
So I am up in the Scott Fishbowl Jimmy Buffett division with my last pick right now as we speak. So I'm gonna make my pick here in a second. I know who I'm taking. I'm gonna take one of my guys, a guy that I have high hopes for, that I frequently compare to former Eagles great Harold Carmichael. Yes, that's right. I'm old. I'm gonna take the inimitable. Well, I guess now he's kind of a carbon copy of Harold Carmichael. So you don't find a lot of 6'8" wide receiver / tight ends with 4.6, 4.5 speed there. So I'm going to draft Donald Parham with my 22nd pick. I feel like he's got an opportunity with the Chargers to be a real red zone threat. I don't feel like he's going to be pretty deep on my team at the top. I wish I could remember who I already drafted at tight end. I don't have it up in front of me, so maybe I'll have to revisit this. Man, getting old sucks. Your memory goes.
It really does. It really does.
I'm going to move on to Matt, and I'll make my draft pick.
I finished my Scott Fishbowl draft. We finished yesterday, so my team is all in the books. I feel okay about it. You know, I think that pick of Drew Lock in the 15th round is really going to make or break my squad.
I picked Drew Lock also. He's my QB4.
He's my QB4 also, yeah. I didn't take a huge risk. But I took some interesting flyers probably. I was really happy with the way it started, and I feel okay about it.
Yeah. I like my team okay. Where did it go here? Oops. I have quarterback. I went Aaron Rodgers. I believe he's going to play. I think he's going to be just fine. Backed him up my QB2, Trevor Lawrence. I think he's got QB1 potential, even as a rookie. Then I took a flyer on Justin Fields. I thought, well, you know, maybe Nagy goes crazy and plays Dalton all year, but I don't think so. I think Fields just has the talent. But I did take Drew Lock on some crazy offhand chance that maybe Fields did not get the amount of playing time the second half of the season. So my other tight ends, let's see. I went with Jonnu Smith late, backed him up with Dan Arnold, another one of my guys from a couple years.
Well, he got so excited he froze. A tradition like no other.
Talking about – there we go.
So where did I freeze at? I'm not unfroze yet?
I think Daniel Jones was what you were talking about?
No Daniel Jones. Dan Arnold.
Dan Arnold.
That
There
Dan,
you go.
yeah.
Yeah. So, anyways.
Yeah, I obviously got Josh Allen as my first quarterback. I took Derek Carr, and then I have Ryan Fitzpatrick. I took Locke late in the draft. I scooped up Marcus Mariota just in case, because we saw, when Carr had to miss time, he was pretty good. Tight ends, I took George Kittle with my second round pick. I really wanted Waller, but he went a little bit earlier. And then in the 11th round, I was able to get Logan Thomas. And then later in the 15th round, I got 14th round, I got Hunter Henry. So I feel pretty good. I feel like all three of those have at least tight end one potential.
Yeah.
My top two running backs, I took Aaron Jones and DeAndre Swift. Later got James Conner, Devin Singletary, and then I took Joshua Kelly and Justin Jackson as two of my last three picks. I waited a while on receiver. I didn't take one until the 6th round. I got DJ Moore, Cortland Sutton, DJ Chark, Jalen Waddle, and then I took John Brown, Christian Kirk, and Paris Campbell and Van Jefferson as kind of like I think all of them have potential upside, but are not guarantees.
Yeah, I didn't take a wide receiver till round 7. And no, I take that back. I did take CD Lamb in round 4. But then after that, everything else was late.
I was pretty happy with my wide receivers considering I waited forever.
I ended up with Ayuk and Pittman, Curtis Samuel, Jalen Reagor. So I enjoyed my team.
Yeah, so
Matt probably has 5 picks made. So
no, we're through 11. I miscalculated. We're through 11. We're still the slowest draft. I was pulling up that, so we're at 11-5 right now. Mine, I don't love my team, but that's because I really like to build around running backs, and running backs in ours went really quick like quarterbacks did, and I didn't want to reach for anybody, so I kind of just let them keep going. It was trying to take some wide, I got Amari Cooper in the 6th round, which I thought was pretty good value. Hurt my heart to draft him, but I was like, you know what? Based on what I think he's going to do this year, based on what he did last year in Scott Fishbowl 10, he was a top scorer.
One side, Lamar Jackson, the other side throwing to Amari Cooper. Just put the tattoo of a bridge across the chest.
Yeah, that is never going to happen. So I ended up with my quarterbacks right now are Herbert. I had to get my guy Baker. I probably reached a little bit for him, but I got him. I got him in the 6th round, I think. 5th round. Yeah, 5th, 6th turn was when I took Baker and Amari. So I took Baker as my QB2. A bunch of QBs flew off the board after that. I think the only ones available still now are Locke, Bridgewater, Wilson. No, Wilson just went. I'm sorry. Locke, Bridgewater, Winston, Taysom Hill, and there was somebody else left. So I'm debating on possibly not even getting 3 quarterbacks now because I don't really want to reach for any of those guys because Fields went the 4th round in ours. So him and Lance both went in the 4th round.
I took Fields at the 7-10, so.
Yeah, I mean, my goal was after I got Baker, I was like, okay, I'll wait a couple rounds and then – or he must have gone the same round as I went Baker because I was like, I'll wait a couple rounds and I'll grab Fields because I don't think anybody's going to grab Dalton and I can grab him much later just in case he doesn't start. And then, yeah, he went in that same round. I was like, well, I guess I'm not going Fields. And as soon as Fields went, Lance went. I was like, well, there go those 2 guys. And I didn't really feel comfortable taking Zach Wilson. He just went in the last round with Daniel Jones, so in round 10. My running backs are – I took Jonathan Taylor, Antonio Gibson. Then I got James Robinson, and he was my 10th round pick. I felt like that's just good value for Robinson. Taking him, I think it was a 9th or 10th round. I was like, I still think he's going to have a role with Jacksonville. I don't think ETN's going to get everything, and all the other running backs were going. It was between him and Zach Moss, and just not that big on Zach Moss. So I was like, I think Robinson's still got a better shot of producing, so I'm going to go with him. Then my wide receivers, so I took Allen Robinson was my first. I think I took him in the 4th round. I backed that up with Amari Cooper. Got Tyler Lockett fairly late as well, which I was pretty happy with just because of how he's produced. And then my last one, so I took Michael Pittman, who you guys know I'm a fan of. Obviously, we're all big fans of Michael Pittman. Logan Thomas finally because he's the last tight end on the board that I thought has tight end one upside because everybody went in. I really thought some of those guys would fall. They didn't. It was a huge run after I passed on tight end. I think it was the 8th or 9th round I passed, and then a huge run of them went. So I just tried to grab Logan Thomas. I took Marquise Hollywood Brown, and I don't feel great about it, but I think with the upside, it's a deep enough format that it's
I don't
not.
feel like I even know you anymore. Amari
I know,
Cooper, Marquise Brown.
I'm not happy
Well,
with myself either.
If we're being
But-
fair, Fox, you did the same thing last year, so.
Oh, I did the same. I have taken so many shares of Derek Carr this offseason. I'm pretty sure they're going to make me return all my Broncos jerseys.
Yeah, I just looked at it and I was like, with number one, I'm going against everything I believe in, which probably means that this team's going to succeed because usually when I go in with what I want, my teams are horrible. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to go against it. Now my team's going to be successful. But at the same time, with as deep as this is, like, Brown's one of those guys I don't have to worry about. Like, he's likely going to start in my last flex spot. So the games that he's great is probably going to help me win. In the games that he sucks, I'm probably going to lose. But it is what it is. Like, I know he's an upside shot, but I mean, the best wide receivers on the board were like Mike Williams and I thought about Darnell Mooney, but I kept getting sniped on everybody. Like, I wanted Keenan Allen instead of Allen Robinson. He went a pick ahead of me, and I wanted Jarvis Landry or Odell. Both of those guys went a pick ahead of me. So I was trying to like double up my quarterback wide receivers. So at the end of the day, I don't hate it, but I don't love it either. It's not, it can't be worse than my team last year. So
I was reading, I can't remember who, one of the fantasy analysts, I wish I could remember, on Twitter put, if you're not actually taking the players you're saying have potential this year when you write articles, then you're a fraud. And since I mentioned that I thought John Brown had potential and that I thought Christian Kirk might have potential, I was like, I guess I better draft them and suffer the consequences.
But you draft them where you think their value is. If they're 3 rounds after their ADP and you think they're a value, but you still don't draft them, then I think the case can be made that there's a little bit of fraudulent action going on. Unless they're just somebody you like a lot better there.
So I took Brown in the 16th, Kirk in the 17th, and Paris Campbell in the 18th. I figured those were my receiver flyers.
Yeah. So you know who my guys were that I took that were like, well, I keep saying I like them. Took Brian Edwards, 1603, and LaMichael P. Ryan at 1710. I still feel like P. Ryan
at the end. I instead went, for reasons known only to God, I decided to go with Joshua Kelly again. And immediately when I put it, because, I don't know if you guys saw, but I did a running thread on Twitter of all my picks and why I picked them. Immediately after I posted that, one of our listeners posted, like, I thought the coaches are out on him. And I'm like, well, the coaches aren't the only ones, but I took him anyway. It was the 19th round or the 20th round. So I'm like,
yeah, there's 2 guys that I'm hoping. I'm pretty sure none of the guys in my league watch or listen to us. So I'm curious on when did David Johnson go for you guys? Because he's a guy that I'm seriously thinking about targeting, him and Philip Lindsay, and just trying to shore up what I think is going to be that backfield. Because he's just been sitting at the top of the queue for like the past, I don't even know. I was trying to see how to find out who was the highest or lowest on players, but I can't figure this site out.
He went in the 11th round, 12th pick in the Buffett division.
So it looks like Philip Lindsay, the earliest was 705, the latest was 2001.
Oh, goodness.
I thought he was asking about David Johnson.
Yeah, he did. I was going to look at – he asked about both, I thought. So yeah. I'm going to look. David Johnson says earliest was 711, latest was 1401. So you probably have to pay up for day. I'd honestly, at that ADP, probably rather have Philip Lindsay.
Lindsay went 1504 in the Buffett division.
Yeah.
So 4 rounds.
David Johnson still has good name value. People still think about that 2016 season and get excited.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious to see how the rest of this goes. It's just been a very weird draft. I'm sure all of them have been. Everybody keeps talking about how each one is different. It's just been weird seeing the way these drafts. It's been like huge runs on certain positions. Like every time someone goes like 2 or 3 wide receivers, and you see like a whole round of wide receivers going, it just like depletes my queue. So it's been a very interesting draft. I'm curious to see how the rest of my team shakes out. That's
to
for
make
sure.
to make you feel better, though, Dennis. They were talking about Aaron Rodgers' comments over the weekend on the NFL radio this morning, and both of them said they're now 100% convinced. One of them was Charlie Weiss. I can't remember who the lady was. The 100% convinced that he's resigned himself to being in Green Bay this year.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you just listen to his comments, it was pretty much, he's like, oh, I'll make
He said,
my
I'll
decision.
figure it out in 2 weeks.
Yeah, he's like, I'll figure it out. I'll start working out and everything in 2 weeks. I'm like, he's coming back. And I mean, I feel like we all kind of thought that to begin with. I mean, there wasn't really much that pointed to. We all know that he can be spiteful, but I really don't think he was going to sit out an entire season. I think he loves football way too much for that. But all right, let's talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers. They finished 12-4 in first place last year. They lost epically 48-37 to the Browns in the wild card round. What a great game that was for the Cleveland Browns. Franchise changing, if I do say so myself. The key additions, though, we're here to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers. I apologize. The key additions, they added Trey Turner at guard and the great Kalen Ballage at running back. Their key losses, linebacker Bud Dupree goes to the Titans. Running back James Conner goes to the Cardinals. Tackle Alejandro Villanueva goes to the Ravens, and guard David DeCastro, who I believe is going to retire. Yeah, but I believe because of the knee injuries, he's probably going to retire. I believe is what, as Austin was very upset about that when that news dropped in our Slack channel. He was not a fan at all. In the first round, they took Najee Harris, the running back out of Alabama. In the second round, tight end Pat Freiermuth out of Penn State. And then in the third round, center Kendrick Green. The Steelers went 11-0 to start the 2020 season and faded down the stretch. The group is mostly intact with the additions of Harris and Freiermuth. What do we expect in 2021, Dennis?
Well, I think the Steelers' biggest issue in 2021 is still going to be Ben's arm. How back is it? You know, Ben has always been known for having a big arm, and last year it just wasn't there. I don't know that I'm really sold on it getting back to what it was. And they drafted Najee Harris. You know, there's a lot of banging going on about the quality of the offensive line now. And some of that is, I suppose, a legitimate worry. The rest of it is like, I mean, it isn't like they were the best offensive line in the league last year. Changing a few guys out might not be a bad thing for that line. DeCastro was injured. You know, Villanueva has been spotty lately. I think he's okay. He's going to step into a role in Baltimore. But I would like to see once that line starts to gel a little bit, you know, what's going to happen with him. And I think Harris is they're going to go back to a little more of the Steeler football, and they're going to hammer it with Najee Harris. He's probably their best running back in a number of years. I think he comes in with more cachet than Lev Bell even when Bell was drafted. So I got him as my let me get up here to the top of my list. I've got Harris in PPR right now at RB12 for redraft. I'm going to move him up to RB10. I've got some dynasty rankings coming out. I'm probably moving him up at least to 11. In standard, I have him at 11 right now, but I think he's going to move up to probably 10 for the redraft this year. You know, and the wide receivers, they're all quality wide receivers. It's going to come down to what's the volume going to be. I don't think I think it's going to be a challenging season to own a Steelers tight end. I think Freiermuth is going to come on a little bit. He's going to push Ebron. But with the improved running game and those top three, even Washington included, top four wide receivers, there's a lot of competition for targets. So it might not be the year to own a Pittsburgh tight end. I think if you're in Dynasty, picking up Freiermuth letting him sit on your taxi squad this year, then letting Juju go hit free agency next year. Next year might be Freiermuth's breakout year.
Yeah, I think for me, 2021 really is going to go how the offensive line can go. I think it's underselling it a bit to say there are questions. There are a lot of people that have concerns about their line. They lost their great veteran center, I think it was Marquise Pouncey, retired. You have DeCastro gone, Villanueva gone. They have a lot of turnover. They got some draft picks, some signing, but I don't know how exactly that's going to come together. And if it does come together, I agree with you. I like Najee Harris. You think about a Pittsburgh Steelers team, you pretty much think about a power rushing in the trenches kind of team. Last year, they only ran for 1,351 yards, and that's including rushing performances from receivers and other players on the roster, and 12 touchdowns. They got outrushed by more than 400 yards last year throughout the season. That isn't what you expect from the Steelers, and because of that, I think they really need that probably to save Ben, to save the kind of collapse we saw down the stretch. They started out really hot, but as the season went on, even when they were winning games to get to 11-0, they didn't look great. So I don't think anyone was shocked that they ended up 1-4 in December, and then that really carried into the playoffs where they got pounded. I think they need more balance, and they need that line to hold up, and they need their defense to hold up.
Yeah, I'm not as worried about the defense. I think the defense is going to be just fine. Getting some of those guys back from injury, obviously, you lose a guy like Bud Dupree. That's not easy to bounce back from. He was one of the key figures in that defense. But I don't remember who stepped up for them last year. But just following as many Steelers people as I do, it seems to be like more. I seem to know more Steelers people in the industry than I do anybody else. They all loved whoever the guy was that stepped up last year.
Robert Spillane.
He played pretty good for them. I mean, obviously, Minka's really good. I still will always have a soft spot in my heart for Hayden. I thought he was one of my favorite players with the Browns when they drafted him out of Florida. So I think their defense is going to be fine, but I'm definitely with you guys. The big questions for me, it's going to be Ben and that offensive line because they have talent all over the field. I agree with what Dennis was saying. I don't think Freiermuth is going to be a big part of the offense this year. Moving forward, though, I think he could be a huge piece of that offense. Now, who the quarterback's going to be and everything moving forward, I have no idea. Even if Ben's back next year, I don't think he's got more than a handful of years left. I just don't think that he's going to be in the league for another, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. The one thing I would say might be a good thing for his arm, and, we talked about this all last season, Matt. During the season, I brought up all the time as a baseball fan as I am, I've watched what it's like for these pitchers to come back from having Tommy John surgery. And usually when a pitcher gets Tommy John surgery, they're out for at least a year before they even start rehab. Ben got Tommy John surgery and was back within a year. I wonder how much of that may have affected his arm last year. Now you're talking about another year removed. He's had time to rest it, probably build it back up a little bit because you're definitely going to lose strength in that arm. I mean, he went – I don't remember how long it was, but it was easily 6-7 months of him not throwing. And then remember they started talking about him throwing like the Nerf balls, and everybody was kind of making fun of him when that first video came out last year. So I think he possibly could have his arm strength built back up, but I definitely think it'd be good for them and that offense to kind of go back to running the ball even a little bit. There was a lot of talk, and that's why they let go of I know he was close with Ben Roethlisberger, and I can't remember what his name was. Their offensive coordinator, though, last year, he was like Big Ben's guy, and that's why they threw it so much. I think that's why they drafted Najee. They're going to rely on him a little bit more in the running game. He can catch as well. Very good receiver out of the backfield. So all in all, I think the offense is going to be very intriguing. I don't think they're going away. I would say, in my opinion, it feels weird saying this because of how much I do love the Browns. I feel like the Ravens are still probably the class of the division, and then it's the, who's going to be fighting. I still think Pittsburgh and Cleveland could take that top spot, but I think Baltimore is sitting just ahead of both of those teams. And in my opinion, if I had to pick one, I'd say I'd give Cleveland the slight edge just because I don't have as many questions about that team as Pittsburgh. But they're right there. They're not going away. I have no doubt that Big Ben's not coming back to, just kind of ride off into us and hope that the team's going to carry him to a Super Bowl. I believe if he's coming back, he thinks he's going to be able to play.
And Randy Fichtner was the offensive coordinator they let go last year. And it will be interesting to see, Ben's 3 career highest pass attempt seasons have all come in the last 4 years. Probably not what Tomlin's looking for either.
Yeah, I imagine that they're going to be, again, bringing in a guy like Najee, even with a bad offensive line, I think he's still going to be able to produce. I mean, don't get me wrong. Bama consistently has, if you want to say at worst, a top 5 offensive line in college. So I don't think he's ever ran behind a bad offensive line. But Pittsburgh usually gets this figured out. I don't remember. They don't have was it Musgrave, right? He went to Denver, didn't he? The offensive line coach? No, the old offensive line coach. Munchak, that's right.
He is in Denver.
He's in Denver because I think him and Callahan, who I know is in Cleveland, are like widely considered the best offensive line coaches. And so that will be something interesting because I do think the offensive line wasn't as good last year. Now, maybe it was because some of the injuries, but how much of that was because of, is it Muschamp, right? Because I say Muschamp and I feel like that's
Munchak. It's Mike Munchak.
Muschamp is a college coach. That's why I was like, that really sounds like a college coach to me. Yeah, so I'll be interested. The offensive line could be key for the Steelers this season. All right, fantasy finishes and projections. So Ben returned fairly strong from injury in 2020. What do we expect in 2021? And as they wind it back, Ben Roethlisberger finished his QB 14 last year, 3,803 passing yards with 33 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, and a whopping 11 rushing yards. Matt,
I knew you would love that stat.
I did. That is a great stat, 11 rushing yards. What are your thoughts on Big Ben running it back?
Just to, further.
He isn't running it back very far. That's for
It was true. 11 rushing yards on the 25 rushing attempts.
I wish you to put the 25 part in there too, so I could just add that.
Yeah. Well, that's why I thought I'd look it up for you. I was pretty sure it was less than a yard an attempt. I'm pretty sure it's less than half a yard an attempt.
Yeah.
I do think they're going to try to run it more and have more balance. For as much as we talked about them being this huge passing offense, and he threw it 608 times, he didn't have an incredible statistical season. Didn't even make 4,000 yards. I wouldn't be surprised if touchdowns come back a little bit, maybe more like the 27-28 range. Yardage, probably stays somewhat similar, maybe 36, 37. I think they're going to try to run the ball more. He did pretty well, actually, not turning it over a lot last year, which was what crippled them in the playoffs. So if he can keep that up, I think that's going to be good. That being said, he was a quarterback too last year. I have him as a low-end quarterback too this year. I just think it's, a matter of he probably pulls his stats back a little bit. Hopefully they run more. I thought he was fading a little bit at the end. Maybe Matt's right that the rest will help, but I have him right now at 22.
Yeah, I have him at QB 21. 608 passing attempts last year, and let me see what the team rushing attempts for the Steelers was. 4 completions, 373 rushing attempts. I feel like they're going to want to switch that dynamic a lot this year. So he's probably going to drop somewhere below 550 if I had to guess. And so any yardage he might make up for, I think he's going to lose. So he's going to lose because of fewer attempts. So QB 21, I think as he's getting older and starts to lose a little bit of confidence in that arm as he's building his way back, you can talk a good game, and veterans do. But, I think we saw, Dennis Quaid's character in Any Given Sunday after taking so many hits. Well, he was going into it and feeling good when the bullets started flying. And I think as Ben works his way back, and after last season not having the zip on the ball that he used to have, well, he may have a little bit more. I think he could early on end up committing a few more turnovers because he doesn't have what he historically had when it comes to strength, getting the ball downfield. So I if I have to, if I'm desperate, and I'm making a run, and I've gotten a super flex league, and I've suffered some severe damage to my QB too, I could see maybe trying to make a play for Ben on the cheap. I feel like this year is probably going to be his last year. I think they're going to make the decision to move on, and it is what it is. He's had a great career, so the players, by and large, the player is the last to know. So.
Yes, Manny. So we have done the whole NFL. We've been handling technically 4 teams a week, a division a week, practically. Today we are doing the Steelers and the Ravens because they finished as the top 2 in the AFC North. And then on Thursday, we will talk about the Cleveland Browns and the Cincinnati Bengals. So we've gone through. If you're looking at this, obviously the YouTube channel. I don't know why I said if you're looking at this on YouTube, I can see the YouTube icon there. So if you can scroll through and find all of our videos, we've got all of them. We've literally done, this is the last division we're doing. This is the last before we go into our season-long projections and everything. So we are done. We're about to get to your Baltimore Ravens. So that'll be here in just a minute. It's hard for me to decide what I think is going to happen with Big Ben. And it sucks that we're going to do our QB projections here in like a week because I really want to see what he looks like in the preseason or some of the camps, because I do think that he could easily bounce back or be right around QB 14 if we just know that he can throw the ball deep. I mean, we heard about it all toward the back half of the season that defenses were keying in on him just throwing the short ball. He wasn't going that deep. And even when he was not completing those passes. And if he did get some of his arm strength back and he's able to go down the field, it makes it a little bit harder on the defenses. If they're able to get that running game going with Najee Harris, it makes it harder on the defenses. So I do think that Big Ben could bounce back. Like Dennis, I agree with you. He's not going to be – I think he's got probably 2 to 3 years left, give or take. And a lot of that will depend on what we see from him. If he comes back out again this year and he looks just the same as it did last year, I think he's got maybe 1 or 2. I don't think
I was almost surprised he came back this year. I feel like he was on the fence about whether he was coming back, and it was just the humiliation of how they lost in the playoffs.
I mean, it was absolutely an ass-beating and embarrassing, and I was here for every second of it. But I
had to mute you on Twitter that night.
Was that really that bad?
No,
it was such a great night. No, I think but I also think that could put a fire in them as well, right? Like, they've never lost to the Browns like that. I think the one other time before the week prior where Big Ben didn't even start, the other time Big Ben lost to him, I'm almost positive it was only by like a touchdown, if I'm remembering correctly. Outside of that, he's pretty much beat Cleveland every single time he's played them. So
they should be used to embarrassing playoff losses. I mean, let's not forget this Ben Roethlisberger team lost to Tim Tebow in a playoff game.
Yeah, but that wasn't like the Browns game. I mean, that was Tim Tebow, the one beautiful throw he made in his career it was to Demaryius Thomas, right?
It was to Demaryius Thomas.
Yeah, in overtime. I mean, that game was over from the get-go. If the Browns' defense wasn't as horrible as it was, that wouldn't even have been a contest the way it ended up being. So, we don't talk about the Browns. We got that for Thursday.
Wasn't a beautiful throw, though. I mean,
yeah, I think so.
It was a throw.
It was beautiful. Tim had a couple live bullets in there. It was
when they do that tight end halfback pass in Jacksonville this year, you'll see a few more.
Yeah, he's not going to make it.
All right. So Najee Harris was great at Alabama and was the top RB taken in the draft. Matt, what should we expect in his rookie season?
I'm at Dennis. I think he's going to be good. I think, Dennis, you said you had him at 11. I'm trying to see. I currently have him sitting at 14. There are a lot of guys I like at running back, and I think there's potential that the Steelers line isn't incredible. I still think he's going to have a great rookie season. I think he's going to run really hard. I think it was a great pick. It was the right player going to the right situation. I think he'll fit in well there. and I'm expecting good things. I took him. I mean, you guys, I think, are in the super flex league where, Lord knows, I need a quarterback, and I still took Najee Harris.
Harris is. I'm looking at my rankings, and I've got him at 12. Akers is at 11, and I'm starting to think that Akers, well, he's going to have a really good year. I think he might. I think we're discounting Henderson a little bit.
I'm not.
And I think that Stafford is, if he's nothing else, he is a thrower of the football. So I think Akers is going to have a good year, but I think I'm going to ease Harris up in front of him. Then it's Nick Chubb at 10, and I don't think I can move Najee over Chubb yet. I'm getting there. I think if they're going to get equal rushing volume, then I think Harris is going to go in front of Chubb because Harris is going to get more passing volume to make up for it. Then it's Aaron Jones, and I just think Jones gets a ton of work. So I don't know. Najee Harris, man, when you say right team, right player to the right team to the right scheme, all I got to say is that Mike Tomlin is no Urban Meyer when it comes to drafting running backs.
He hasn't had Najee Harris out there playing slot receiver this offseason either.
No, he is not. It's so funny seeing where we are now with Najee Harris, too, because there was a few people, Jared Wackerly, Ray Garvin, and myself, who were talking about Najee Harris as the best running back in college football last year, while everybody else was saying early. Obviously, a lot of people came around to it toward the end, but everybody else was all about it's Travis Etienne, it's not even close. And Najee, I agree with everything you're saying. I've been trying to find reasons to move him back in the rankings. I have him at 10. I don't care how bad the offensive line is projected to be, and I don't think that they're going to be that good. I'm fairly certain they're going to be like one of the 10 worst offensive lines in the NFL this year. But because of what Najee can do running the ball, his vision, just his overall game, he's going to be very good. I've got him ahead of Akers already. The two closest I have to him in my rankings right now are Antonio Gibson and DeAndre Swift. I can possibly see the argument for moving Gibson ahead of him because I do think Washington is going to be a very good team as well. But I also think he has a little bit more competition in that backfield than Najee does. I don't believe in Benny Snell. I don't believe in Kalen Ballage. I don't believe in who is the other guy.
Jalen Samuels. They have
Jalen Samuels has had like 3 years to prove something, has done nothing. So I think they drafted Najee because they have no faith in anybody else in that room, and they're going to ride him his entire rookie contract, a la a Jerome Bettis, Le'Veon Bell, because I think you can put him in that category. I know that's crazy to say because Jerome Bettis is a Hall of Famer, but I'm talking about when Jerome Bettis first started, when Le'Veon Bell first started, and we saw how special that they could be. I think you can already put Najee into that category. He is going to be a very, very good running back. Not only do they have a very good running back in Najee Harris, they have a ton of very good wide receivers. Last year, the Steelers had 3 wide receivers in the top 25. Does it happen again this year, and who finishes higher in 2021, Dennis? Juju Smith-Schuster was that this year in him finishing as wide receiver 16 with 97 receptions, 831 yards, and 9 touchdowns. Deontay Johnson was third, I'm guessing. Chase Claypool got his number cut off here, but he's got a 1 in front of it. So let's just go with 19. Wide receiver.
Oh, no, he was 20. He was I screwed that up. I think he was 23.
Okay. So Deontay came in second as wide receiver 21, 88 receptions, 923 yards, and 7 touchdowns. And then Claypool came in as wide receiver 23, 62 receptions, 873 yards, and 9 touchdowns. How does that order go for you, Dennis, in 2021?
I have it Deontay Johnson coming in at wide receiver 18, Juju Smith-Schuster at 26, and Claypool at 33. I think Claypool is the bigger downfield threat. I think all 3 of them have some ability in that area, but Claypool is the bigger downfield threat. And so he drops because of Ben's issues with his arm, maybe the offensive line not giving him enough time. So I think Claypool suffers some there. I do think – I don't want to say they're phasing Juju out, but they weren't going to take Juju back unless he came back cheap, which he did. And so it's Deontay Johnson. I know there's a lot of talk about Johnson's drops, but he also caught an awful lot of passes too. A couple of the drops just seem to occur at egregious times. And so then we hang our hat on, the drops. At 18, 26, and 33, what I'm preparing for is people to go, well, if you have the receivers up so far, why is Ben 21? At which I will say, where did Teddy Bridgewater finish last year with 3 top 25 wide receivers? So
19.
Yeah, so just relax a little bit. It's very plausible. But I'm still a Deontay Johnson guy. I think he's going to be the top receiver there for the next couple of years. Juju will be gone after next year. And Claypool will do what he does. I missed on Claypool. I did not like him coming out of college. I didn't think
thought he was going to be a tight end. I think we all talked about him being potentially a tight end.
And I just, he's another one of those guys like DK Metcalf that doesn't have great change of direction. And I think as coaches get smarter, things like that start to not matter. DK's change of direction didn't matter in Seattle, and Claypool's change of direction isn't going to matter here once they get adequate protection and a quarterback that can throw a 35-yard pass.
Yeah, so I have them all three bunched tightly together again, but I have them all three a little bit lower. As I said, I'm lower on Ben. I also think that we're going to see running backs catching the ball be a bigger factor than it was last year. I think Harris is going to get some receptions. I think they are going to use both their tight ends. So I actually have all three of them bunched in the wide receiver 3 category. I have Juju as my highest, currently 25, Johnson at 28, and Claypool at 34. I agree with you. I think Claypool is more of the deep shot guy, and that may be less of what they're doing. He was buoyed a lot last year. He had at least one game where he had 4 touchdowns. I think he had another game where he had 3 touchdowns. I don't know if we have those kind of monster games. Juju wanted to be back. Ben wanted him back. I think they have a better chemistry together than he has with Johnson at times. I think Juju runs safer routes that Ben's going to connect with, and I just think he'll probably still end up as their best receiver. I don't disagree with you that he's going to move on at some point, probably after next year. I'm not as sold as you guys that Ben plays more than 1 year.
I mean, I think Juju came back because he wants to stay with Pittsburgh. We talked a little bit about it when he signed the contract. Pittsburgh's cap goes up massively next season where they could re-sign him. It made sense for him to kind of, hey, I'm going to come back on a 1-year deal, spurn, which, I mean, I know Austin talked about this as a big Steelers fan as he is. He's going to be like a folklore hero for them forever because he spurned not only the Chiefs but the Baltimore Ravens as well to come back to Pittsburgh. So, granted, none of us wanted to see, no offense to Manny and Jerry, who are both Ravens fans in here, nobody wanted to see him go to Baltimore just because of all the other wide receivers and everything they have there. But so I'm with you guys. I thought maybe someone would go the opposite way, although Matt, it looks like is higher on Juju. Obviously on Debbie Debate, all three of us, me, Felix, and Austin, like a different player. I'm on Deontay. Felix, I believe, likes Claypool, and then Austin is really big on Juju.
Austin's a smart man.
Some people do say that. I disagree with that statement, but it is what it is. He's not going to listen to this anyways. I think, for
comments
me,
all the time.
I know he does. With me, Deontay, the big thing, Dennis, you mentioned he had all the drops, but he also had a lot of catches, and they also kept going to him a ton, even after all the drops. And I think that goes to because Big Ben trusted him as well. He did get pulled. I think it was in week 15, 14. I know it was a playoff game for fantasy. He got pulled in like the first half because of the drops, but then he goes back out there. Didn't do much, unfortunately, in the second half. But I think Deontay is going to stay up there. He is my highest ranked right now. I had him.
And he did have the most targets by a fair number.
Wide
He was
margin.
144 to 128 for Juju.
So I am lower on all three of them as well. I do not have all three of them being in the top 24. In fact, the only one I have in the top 24 is Deontay. I have him at 22. And then right now, because I can't separate them. I have Juju and Claypool together. I have them at 33 and 34 right now. So I think that because of what we talked about earlier with them running the ball more with Najee and everything, it's going to have this whole offense take a little bit of a step back. Just because I believe in Deontay and what he did in the red zone as well last year. He was always able to create separation. And in the amount of targets he got last year, I imagine he still gets that. So he is my number one wide receiver on this team this year and the only one to finish in the top 24. Ebron was a strong tight end 14 in 2020, but now Freiermuth is there. What should we expect from the tight end position, Dennis? Ebron finished, your guy, Eric Ebron, tight end 14, 56 receptions, 558 yards, and 5 touchdowns.
I think, Ebron, man, he's had his time. Unfortunately, he's going to be the starter. I expect him to be the starter all year. I think it's going to be with Harris coming in. I think the running back is going to siphon off some of the tight end targets. You still got your big three at wide receiver. It's a season where when Freiermuth isn't playing this year in Dynasty, go out and see what you can do to try and acquire him. Ebron isn't around long. He's getting up there in years. Given the stones he carries around at the end of his arms, I'm surprised he's lasted this long in the league. I have Ebron at 23 and Freiermuth at 41. I think those are reasonable numbers. Freiermuth will siphon off some of Ebron's targets, and Harris is going to siphon off some of them, but he's still going to get enough volume to be a viable tight end too. So in 2 tight end leagues, he's going to be startable. In 1 tight end leagues or even tight end premium leagues, I don't think he's going to get the volume on a consistent basis to warrant starting for anything other than a bye week.
Yeah, I mean, he did a lot of his damage by getting 91 targets last year. I think that comes way down. I think, he split time with Vance McDonald last year. McDonald only saw 20 targets. I see a little bit more of an evening out between him and Freiermuth. I have Ebron as tight end 26 right now. I don't think he finishes in the top 24. I think that, they're going to throw it a little bit less. The receivers and Harris are more of the focus. I think Ebron's probably best season with Pittsburgh was last year.
I agree, and I actually would not be surprised if we see less of Ebron than some think because of how good of a run blocker Pat Freiermuth is. He was the most complete tight end in this draft class, in my opinion. And with the way that we've been talking about them running the ball more, I would not be surprised if we don't see Pat Freiermuth out there more often than we think right now. If that's the case, I would not be surprised if Ebron produces even less because he's going to be out there on run plays, which means just less time for Ebron to be out there in case they end up not running the ball with Najee. All right, on to the Baltimore Ravens, who finished 11-5 and in second place last year. They lost 17-3 to the Buffalo Bills in the divisional round. Their key additions, they brought over wide receiver Sammy Watkins, Alejandro Villanueva, the tackle, Juwan James, the tackle, Kevin Zeitler, the guard. Key losses, Orlando Brown, the tackle, was traded to the Chiefs. Willie Snead, wide receiver, goes to the Raiders. Yannick Ngakoue, the defensive end, goes to the Raiders. Mark Ingram, running back, to the Texans, and Matthew Judon, the linebacker, to the Dolphins. In the first round, they took Rashad Bateman out of Minnesota, wide receiver. First round, in their last pick, they took
Odafe Away, I think.
Linebacker. Sorry, but Ravens fans, I have no idea. I'm going to be honest, I don't even know who that is.
Jason Oweh from Penn State.
At
Penn State, he went by Jason.
Gotcha. Well, I wish, Good for Jason. That'd have been a much easier name to say. Ben Cleveland, the guard, in the third, and Brandon Stevens, the cornerback, in the third as well. The AFC North is fiercely competitive. Can the Ravens keep up, Matt? And what will we see from their passing game this year?
I think they'll keep up. I like the Ravens a little bit more in 2021 than the Steelers. If I'm being honest, I'm not sure I totally trust the Steelers. I think we all have been waiting for Lamar Jackson to be more of a volume passer. They've definitely gotten him a good set of weapons. I like the pick of Bateman, bringing in Sammy Watkins. He gets a veteran. They still have Mark Andrews, who's great. Marquise Brown finally saw 100 targets last year. They have good running backs. They added a lot of good pieces on the line. They still had some good pieces. I would like to see him take a step up as a passer, but I think it's more us in the community that worry about him as a passer. It seems like the Ravens have been pretty successful doing what they're doing with him running. I don't know how long his career can be if he takes the kind of hits that he has to take, not only as a quarterback, but as a quarterback that's running for 1,000 yards a season. But that certainly has been successful for them. I still think they're a strong playoff competing, strong position to compete for a playoff berth.
Yeah, I think the Ravens are what we thought they are, to quote Denny Green. Is Lamar going to pass more this season? I feel like they've put the tools in place. When somebody tells you who they are, you got to believe them. And the Ravens are a running team. They also want to pass more. So they've invested in the offensive line, and they've invested in their receiving core, bringing in Terrace Marshall and Rashad Bateman, Sammy Watkins. We know Mark Andrews is a stud. And Hollywood Brown is starting to come around. Brown's going into, his third year now? After 100 targets last season, I think he's a shoo-in for 120, 125 targets, especially with the extra game. So where on a 16-game basis, where would I project the attempts? I think they're going to go up. If they go up 10%, then it's 450, 460. So I think somewhere around if it was a 16-game season still, I think this would be the season where Lamar gets up around 460. So he's going to add just a couple attempts more per game, 2, 3. He'll have a couple games where maybe he's 8 or 9 passes above what he normally does, and a couple games where, they're running all over teams. I'm talking about you, Houston. But he's got to improve on his 63% completion rate from last season. His quarterback rating, 95.7, is just kind of middle of the road. So he has to improve on some of those passing efficiency metrics. And I don't know if Sammy Watkins is the guy to help him do that.
No,
but
he's not.
It may be for one game. Let's everybody start Sammy Watkins week 1. Get it out of the way. But I like Jackson. From a fantasy standpoint, they're going to run him. He's. It wouldn't surprise me if he gets over 1,000 yards, but it's because of the 17-game season. So he just creeps over it. So his per game average drops a little bit. So I think they're going to continue to do that, especially with the running game they have with J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards. They've got a good rushing attack without Lamar and a great one with him. So I expect a few more pass attempts, a few less rushing attempts, but still a QB1 season, mid QB1.
I don't know if I think 64% completion is that bad for an NFL.
It's not horrible.
Quarterback.
We've
seen some guys that are much lower than that.
Yeah, you'd like to see it higher, though. I mean, it doesn't sound like a lot.
It was the 7th lowest last season.
Yeah, so that's the thing. Like, it doesn't sound like a lot, but when you go from 63 to 68, right? Like, it's only 5%. But that 5% is a lot of passes and everything that goes into it. It is a big deal. And, like, I know we have some Ravens fans in here, and I don't mean to upset anybody, but he's just not a good passer. He's just not. He is not.
I think I misspoke. 63.3% was the team passing completion percentage. 64.4 was Lamar's. So Trace McSorley was really bad.
He's not horrible, though, either. He's not as bad as people give him credit for. He's just not – he hasn't progressed like that first year to second year, he took a massive jump. In my opinion, he looked much better passing the ball he did that first year to second year. But he hasn't taken the next jump, and that's what worries me. He's dynamic. He's the best athlete on the field with his legs. He is, as much as I hate it as a Browns fan, whenever he starts running, it's much like we're going to talk about, with tonight. With Shohei Ohtani, it's must-watch TV. Like when Lamar Jackson is playing, he's much-watch because of what he can do with his legs. But when it comes down to, I don't disagree with you, Jerry. The Ravens did lead the league in drops. When you're not necessarily putting the ball right in the chest of some of your wide receivers, like everyone brings up the game with the Browns. I think it was it a Sunday night game or Thursday night game? They ended up coming the cramping game, we'll call it that. Everyone gives Mark Andrews crap that he dropped on that wide open pass. Lamar could have thrown a much easier pass for him to catch. Now, granted, I guess if you want to put that on Mark Andrews, you can. But I'm going to go ahead and say that, the top quarterbacks in the league put that on Mark Andrews for him to catch it and then run into the end zone. They don't throw it over him. So Lamar is still one of the best quarterbacks in the league. I was one of the people talking about how I did not think he was going to have quite as good a year last year. I was down on him fantasy-wise, not NFL-wise, but fantasy-wise. That ended up coming true. This year, I am back in on him. I do think that he has another good year. I do expect him to be back up in top 5. Like I said earlier, I think the Ravens are still the class of the division. They are the ones that Dennis, you quoted Denny Green. I'm crowning them right now. They have not been beat. They deserve to wear the crown of the AFC North, and I expect them to be the top team. I don't expect it to be Pittsburgh this year. But I still think Lamar needs to improve here and there. He's still going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And, I don't like to compare him to Mike Vick like a lot of other people do. But I do think that there is some – it was Monday night. Thank you, Jerry. Monday night game. I do think that the throwing issues in both of their games is going to be a key factor for Lamar. And if he cannot continue to improve that, do I think that they win a Super Bowl? I do, because their team is just so good, and Lamar is just that dynamic with his legs, much like Vic is. But we saw it last year with Buffalo. We've seen it the past couple years when they get into the playoffs. When these teams find ways to slow down Lamar and force him to beat them with his arm, he struggles to do that. And until he can do that, it's just going to be hard for me to buy all in on him. Fantasy asset,
also,
top 3, top 5. Go ahead.
To speak to, I know Jerry put in there that they led the league in drops. They did not. According to the statistical scoreboard, Dallas had the most drops by team. The Ravens were 23rd. Okay,
so there you go. And that's what I hate about the Lamar discussion, because as soon as I say I don't think he's a good passer, I'm bashing Lamar. I'm not bashing Lamar. If you go look at the statistics, it shows that he's just not as high-end passer. I'm not trying to say that he's horrible. I literally just said he's the best athlete on the field. He's a top 5 fantasy asset, top 3 fantasy quarterback. I'm not bashing Lamar. But it'd be the same thing if you were to ask me as a fan of the Browns, going into last year, what Baker could improve on. He needed to be more consistent. He needed to be more accurate. I'm not bashing Baker Mayfield. I'm speaking truths. I'm speaking facts. Lamar has to be more consistent. He has to get better passing the ball. It's not bashing Lamar. It's talking about the one weakness in his game. It's not a bad thing. Everybody has weaknesses. We can't all be Tom Brady out there. That's why Tom Brady's the GOAT. And that hurts me to admit that. I guess so, Jerry. Yeah, I guess we're just bashing everybody on this show. That's what we do. So
Pittsburgh actually had more drops. They were second in the league in passes.
But
that's because Deontay Johnson was the league leader in drop passes.
Yeah, Deontay did Big Ben no favors last year. But yeah, I like I said, I'm all in. I'm back in on Lamar this year. I think I have him 4 right now. So he's going to be a fantasy stud again this year. Expect Baltimore to be a very good team. And I do think that the reason they drafted Rashad Bateman and Tylan Wallace is because of the Ravens' issues at wide receiver. And both of those guys, I think, feed into what Lamar is not good at, being an accurate passer. Guess what Rashad Bateman and Tylan Wallace are very good at? They have great catch radiuses. They can stretch their bodies. They've got strong hands. So if the ball is not in their chest or it's not leading them, they have no issues making and moving their bodies back toward the ball or making great catches. It's why I think they brought in those two guys. I do think those two guys are going to help out Lamar as well. It's why I've continued to say, in my opinion, the Ravens and the Steelers, who we're talking about today, have two of the better front offices in the game with the way they handle drafts. And I think that they drafted two of the better wide receivers in the draft this year for what Lamar struggles with. Dobbins and Edwards mostly split the backfield duties last year, and both are back in 2021. What do we think the split will be, Matt? J.K. Dobbins came in as running back 24, 134 carries, 805 yards and 9 touchdowns, 18 receptions for 120 yards. Well, I guess Edwards came in as RB 37 with 144 carries, 723 yards, 6 touchdowns, 9 receptions for 129 yards.
Yeah, I think they're still going to use them both, but I think we'll see more of probably J.K. Dobbins this year. I think they are going to try to throw the ball a little bit more because they've invested in getting those receivers and other passing elements, and I still think Lamar's gonna run quite a bit. So I have a Dobbins solidly in as an RB2. Edwards I have a little bit lower. I have him in the 40s somewhere, I think. I think he's still going to contribute, but J.K. Dobbins is the much more talented back.
Yeah, I think we see with Dobbins, it comes down to, can he get the volume? I have him at running back 17 right now, and the big concern is how much volume is Lamar going to take, and how much volume are they going to give to Edwards? I have Edwards at RB 46, so mid-range RB2 and a low-end RB4. Edwards is going to get some play. He's been effective when he plays.
Yeah.
So he'll get some run, and they do run the ball more than any team in the NFL. But Dobbins is going to need to get like 275 carries, I think, if he's going to take that next step, because they don't pass the ball that much. So even if he's second or third, if he ends up third behind, let's say, Hollywood Brown and Mark Andrews in targets, Dobbins is likely only to get, 60, 65 targets?
Maybe.
It just drops off so steeply. I love Dobbins. I'm an Ohio State guy. Love Dobbins. But I'm not sure that I trust he's going to get that 270 carries. I think that I'm still going to try to acquire him. I think Lamar he's improving in the passing game. I have him at QB4. So I think what we didn't see last year was a big step. I think we all wanted a big step in the passing game. And I think what the Ravens told us is, we gave you some stuff, but we don't feel like we gave you enough. And one of the things, they had injuries. They lost Ronnie Stanley. Their offensive line struggled a little bit. Well, they invested in the line. They invested in the receivers. And now they're at a situation where, hopefully, with a little more time, Lamar increases that efficiency like he had in his second year, when he had 1 year where he completed 76% of his passes. 72.
Yeah, that was 19.
Yeah, that was second year, because that was the game everyone went crazy when I think it was Brown in the first game. He went for over 100 yards. Right. I mean, it was almost all after the catch. But yeah, he did have one beautiful throw in there where he's whipped it in between two defenders to, it may have been Boykin, I think, in the red zone or something like that. But yeah, that was the year, because that was the year they went on the run. Everybody thought they were going to win the playoffs, and they got beat by, I think,
Tennessee.
The Chiefs. Was it Tennessee?
Yep, at home. Tannehill.
I think if you believe Dobbins is going to get the volume, then I think you move him up your ranks. I think right now, like I said, I have him at 17. He's in the area with like Austin Eckler, DeAndre Swift, Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the area with those guys who all have questions about their volume.
Yeah, so I have Dobbins right now as RB 16, and I've got Edwards at 34. So I expect Dobbins to be a running back too. Edwards, I think he's going to get the touchdowns. They like to use him last year in the red zone. I don't think he's going away. I mean, he out-carried Dobbins. He was a starter last year. I imagine Dobbins is probably going to be the starter or get more carries, but I don't ever see it going to like a 70-30 split between the two of them. They don't bring Edwards back if they don't like him. I think that they like to use both those guys with Lamar Jackson because it does make that team have a very dynamic rushing attack. You've got Lamar, who, again, when he has the ball in his hands, is electric and extremely elusive. I mean, we talk about the hits that he takes, but he also avoids a lot of hits as well, just because of how good he is at avoiding tackles, getting out of bounds. I don't think he doesn't really ever slide as much as I can remember, but he definitely gets out of bounds a lot, does a very good job of making players miss. And then you bring in guys like Dobbins, who's a little bit of a mixture of the two, right? He can be elusive, got speed a little bit more than Edwards. Edwards kind of comes in as like that power back. So I think altogether those three make for a very dynamic rushing attack. Dobbins, I do think, will get a little bit more passing work than Edwards this year. He was good at it at Ohio State. I think a little bit of an underrated part of his game, though he should have caught that ball against Clemson. We'd probably be talking about, I don't know if they beat LSU, but they've been at least back-to-back national championship games at least. But, yeah, Dobbins, I think he'll take a little bit of a step forward. I do expect him to be a RB2 this year. The wide receivers. So Brown saw 100 targets in 2020, but only had 58 receptions. Watkins and Bateman are there now. What do we expect from these receivers, Dennis, and who finishes higher? Marquise Hollywood Brown did finish as wide receiver 36 with 58 receptions, 769 yards, and 8 touchdowns.
Which receiver do I think is going to finish with the most? Or
yeah,
Hollywood Brown.
Okay.
I think he's going to be behind Andrews in catches probably. He'll surpass Andrews in yardage pretty comfortably. But I don't know, 58 receptions. What did I say? I called him for 125 targets earlier this show. Actually, I think Brown's going to lead him in receptions as well. I think Andrews stays doing what he's doing. So 65 receptions, 750 yards, 7, 8, 9 touchdowns. I think Andrews stays there. Brown, I think he's progressing. He's at that point where it's put up or shut up. It's breakout time. He knows what the offense is. Adding another receiver that maybe can take some of the pressure off him from the defensive backs. Let's call Brown for, I don't know, 70, 71 receptions, 72. I think he pushes for 1,000 yards. I think he breaks the 1,000-yard barrier. Will that be Lamar's first 1,000-yard receiver?
Yes, it would be. Yeah.
Now, it might be 1,001, but I think Hollywood. He's a dynamic player with the ball in his hand. So
yeah,
I don't know that he's gonna finish. Where did he finish last year?
38, 36.
36. So I think he can push up there to the 24, 25, borderline wide receiver too. But it's going to come with efficiency, meaning he's going to have to break some long plays, have a couple busted coverages to get him some yardage where he can run out there and catch that ball from Lamar. So I like Hollywood Brown to keep improving.
I feel like if anything, we learned last year that Marquise Brown is not a number one wide receiver. I think he's, maybe a second or third option. I think he's a good deep threat. I think that's why they went and got a veteran, Sammy Watkins. I think that's why they drafted Rashad Bateman and Tylan Wallace. I think they're going to use all of them. The Ravens may have only been 23rd in drops with 16, but 9 of those were from Marquise Brown, who did struggle catching the ball at times. I don't think any of them is going to be great. You're talking about, you think they can get to 125 targets for Brown. I don't know that I see it. He had 100, and the next closest receiver had 48, and then they had a couple guys with 20. I think it's going to be a much more even splits. I don't think we're going to see them have Lamar Jackson throw it 600 times. He threw 376 last year. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes to 450, 460. I don't even think he's going to go to 500. I don't think they want to be a high-volume passing offense because they run the ball so well and because they play defense so well. Personally, I think Bateman ends up leading them in receptions.
I wouldn't be surprised if Bateman leads them in receptions. I do think he's going to end up being in the slot. I think he's going to be very good. But if I had to pick who's going to finish higher, I do think it's going to be Brown. And I do think it's going to be Brown because I think Bateman and Andrews, I've said this before, I think both those guys are going to be working somewhat in the same area. But I think having another guy like Bateman and Andrews right there, and even to Watkins, is going to help open up things for Brown. I mean, just to use a college scheme and offense here for you, when a quarterback can run and cause that kind of issue, if they do play action fakes or anything, when you got a guy like Marquise Hollywood Brown running down the field, all you need is Lamar Jackson to hit him sometimes, especially if those defenses start to creep up, if Lamar looks like he's going to take off and run with it. Again, that comes down to, one, yes, Marquise Hollywood Brown catching the ball, which, Matt, you just mentioned he struggled with a little bit last year, and two, Lamar putting it on him accurately. There were times that Lamar did not do that, but I think because of just the overall playmaking ability that he has once the ball is in his hands, the way that they drafted this year, I do think Bateman's going to be very good. I still think Wallace is going to be very good. I think he fits that team in a very real way that I think both of those guys could help clear things for Brown a little bit more, maybe not have to be the guy. And then bringing in a veteran like Sammy Watkins, he still, has some cachet. I'm not betting on him. I'm not drafting him. I don't think Watkins is going to be much of anything this year fantasy-wise, but I think bringing him onto this team helps because he's still a viable deep threat, and I think that could open things up for this offense, especially if you've got two guys on the outside who can burn you deep in Brown and Watkins, and defenses have to worry about Lamar taking off if they all turn their backs to him. So overall, I think it's going to be a very good offense. I'm leaning on Brown. He started to really come on at the end of last year, and if that kind of chemistry and that can continue, I actually have him as a wide receiver 2 right now. I have him as wide receiver 23. I think that he is going to have a really good year and kind of show us why they picked him where they did. I don't think he should have been a first-round wide receiver. I don't think that he is a number 1 like Matt said, but he definitely is a very good wide receiver, and I think that he can show that this year. Last but not least, we've got Mark Andrews. He has been the rock at tight end for the past few years. Does that continue, Matt, and where does he finish? Last year, even dealing with all the issues, I know he missed at least a game, finishes tight end 6, 58 receptions, 701 yards, 7 touchdowns. Just a weird year for him. I do think that the one thing for me that really stood out for him was, the fact that he does have type 2 diabetes, and he still came out and played an entire season where at, a high risk with COVID and everything. So much props to him. He could have easily opted out. Nobody would have questioned him on that, but he is right up there for me. I think he's my tight end 5 because I do have Kyle Pitts ahead of him. Again, just because I don't want to sing that Team Up North fight song, so I got to go all in on Kyle Pitts. But I'm all in on Mark Andrews. I think he's going to be really good this year. Matt, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I have him at tight end 5 as well. I think he's going to be solid. He has good chemistry with Jackson. He's developed into one of the best pass-catching tight ends in the league.
Yeah, he's my tight end 5 too. I actually have Hawkinson in front of him.
Yeah, I do too.
Just because I think that Detroit's gonna, Hawkinson right now is the number 1 receiver on the Detroit Lions. So
he might be the number 1 and 2 receiver on the Lions the way it's going.
Right, and I do think Hollywood may be better than any of the receivers on the Lions. So, but I like Andrews. He's gonna he does what he does. He's a seam splitter. He's got great chemistry with Lamar Jackson. I think that the type of player that Mark Andrews is matches up well with Lamar Jackson because it's similar to the type of quarterbacks in scheme that he played in college. And so he's adequate blocker, but they have blocking tight ends. But he gets down the field. He's got decent speed, and he just makes play after play after play. So until he shows me he's not doing it anymore, I'm going to keep Andrews up there. I had Andrews above Hurst when they were drafted. I thought it was ridiculous for them to have drafted Hurst over Andrews, but they did, and Andrews is the better receiving tight end. Checks in comfortably as my tight end 4.
All right, so that will do it for us today. We talked a little bit about Ben. I do think he makes it. He makes a little bit of a return this year. So that will do it though for the Steelers and the Ravens. Matt and myself will be back on Thursday to talk about the Cleveland Browns and the Cincinnati Bengals, plus possibly a little bit of Black Widow, and then the low-key season finale. Go ahead, Dennis, before we cut out of here.
So hit your newsstands. Check out the pro forecast from Football Diehards. I'm contributing to Diehards this year, so I've got some articles in there. Pro Forecast magazine on your newsstands now for redraft.
Go check it out. See what Dennis had to say in there. We will be back again on Thursday. Until then, we will talk to you guys again soon.